Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another episode of the Cat Skull Academy, the series that aims to give you the best start possible in EVE Echoes. Today we're going to be looking at the T4 Interceptor Frigates and the concept of speed tanking. Now I'm here in an Executioner II that I've just used to clear out a Tier 7 anomaly on my own. T4 Frigate, Tier 7 anomaly. And I'm going to show you at the end of the video how that's possible. So what we're going to cover in this video is we're going to have an in-depth look at the Slasher II, the Condor II, the Atron II, and the Executioner II. We're going to have a look at how their skills work and interact with each other, and we're going to look at how you can fit these to do all kinds of crazy different things, because these are incredibly powerful and versatile ships if you know how to use them. Of course, we'll have a look at the relevant skills required to fly those, and then at the very end of it all, we will go over that demonstration of me clearing a Tier 7 anomaly using just a T4 frigate. Now, if you do enjoy this video or find it useful, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, and please make sure to ding that notification bell so that you never miss it when a new video goes live. I am uploading daily. Let me know what topics you want me to cover in future videos, either by commenting down below or finding me on the social media channels at the bottom of your screen. And if you want to go the extra mile to support this channel, you can do so by joining us on Patreon. Details are on screen now. Awesome. Well, that said and done, let's jump in and have a look at what T4 Interceptors are. Now, before we get too far into this one and actually take an in-depth look at each of the individual ships and talk about the concept of speed tanking and what you can do with them, first of all, we need to clarify what I mean by a T4 Interceptor frigate. Well, if you go into any of the four main Empire trees, whether that's the Amarr Empire, the Minmatar Republic, the Gallente Federation, or the Caldari State, I'm going to go into the Amarr. If you scroll up the frigate line of ships to Tech Level 4, you will find a Something 2 frigate. On the Amarr tree, that's the Executioner II, as you can see here. On the Gallente tree, that'll be the Atron II. On the Caldari tree, that's the Condor II. And on the Minmatar tree, that will be the Slasher II. We'll go over those in depth later on. Now, each of these ships are very similar to each other. They all have the exact same fitting profile, for example, of 2 high slots, 2 mid slots, 2 low slots, and 2 of each of the combat and mechanical rigs. They all have the same roll bonus of an 80% reduction to stasis weapon fire capacitor need and 80% reduction to warp disruptor capacitor need, meaning they use hardly any capacitor at all when using a stasis weapon fire or a warp disruptor, very useful for locking down targets, and they all have the same afterburner bonus per level of plus 10% afterburner velocity bonus, giving a full 50% increase to the afterburner velocity bonus if that's fully trained. That makes these already quite nippy frigates exceptionally fast when there's an afterburner fitted to them if you're skilled into it. Now, the frigate command bonus is where these ships start to differentiate from each other. All 4 of them do get a bonus from frigate command, but what that bonus actually is differs from ship to ship. Here on the Executioner II, for example, it's a plus 12% increase to small laser damage and a 10% reduction to small laser capacitor need. That is the bonus that will differ from ship to ship, and we will cover those in detail as we look at each of those ships. So let's start by doing that by looking at the Executioner II. Yeah, I know, look at Benzie in another Amarr ship. Well, you know what, it's a frigate, it's an interceptor, lasers are one of the best weapon systems around right now, and the Executioner II is an absolutely phenomenal ship. So whether or not it's Amarr, you can bet your button I'm going to be using one. Now, as we've just discussed, this thing has a frigate command bonus here of plus 12% to small laser damage and a 10% reduction to small laser capacitor need, meaning if you've got frigate command trained all the way up to level 5, that's a 60% increase to small laser damage and a 50% reduction to the capacitor requirements to actually feed those things. That means this thing can actually pack one hell of a punch. And here you can see that with the fittings that I've got and the skills that I have, I've got this thing up to 115.5 DPS. Now, I've tried not to spend too much on any of the frigates that I'm showcasing in this video, because one of the major advantages of frigates is that they are usually dirt cheap. If you lose this, it's easy to replace. Now, the one concession I have made there is for the high slots. Here I've gone for Imperial Navy small pulse lasers, because these were dirt cheap on the market. If you can't find something like Imperial Navy, then you can also find the storyline stuff right now for sometimes as little as 50,000 a pop. It's insane how cheap these can be. Now go for the small pulse lasers, because the extra range doesn't matter, we just want the straight up damage. We're going to be up close and personal and be able to use these anyway, and we'll cover that when we talk about speed tanking. Now for the mid slots here, I've gone for the standard fit of something like an Executioner II. Here I've gone for a Mark V stasis webifier, which helps slow down any ship as it's trying to orbit me, useful for taking out other frigates. Again, this is all about transverse velocity. If they're moving in the same direction as you, that transverse velocity is lower. You want them to be either stopped or moving in the opposite direction so that you can be going as fast as possible in relation. Now again, we'll talk more about transverse velocity in a moment, but understand that a stasis webifier is a very useful thing to have, and of course the Executioner II gets bonuses to the, gets a reduction to the amount of capacitor required to fuel that. Speaking of capacitor though, I've input an Imperial Navy Small Energy Nosferatu, again, dirt cheap, but a Mark V will do the job just fine here. You're going to be within that 4 to 5 kilometer range anyway because we're using pulse lasers, which means the Energy Nosferatu is going to be in its range to actually do what it does best, which is to say, drain energy out of their capacitor and dump it into mine, which helps fund those lasers even more. Of course, in the low slots, 100% you need an afterburner. Mark V small afterburner is enough, but if you do happen to have something a bit more expensive, do feel free to fit it. Just, you don't need to. Again, don't necessarily focus on getting this thing right the way up to as high as possible. It's not a vanity ship. It doesn't need big expensive fittings. That way, if you lose it, it's nice and easy to replace. Again, we've got that afterburner velocity bonus of plus 50%, which is showcased here on the ship, giving a flight velocity adjustment of 216% when this thing is activated. That's a humongous flight velocity adjustment, and when you see one of these actually in space, you'll see how fast it can move using that afterburner. The faster you're moving, the harder you are to hit. That said, in the second low slot, I've gone for a Mark V small armor repairer, just so I can top up any incidental damage that I do take, and you'll see that in action as well later. Now, the low slots tend to be the same across all 4 of these Tech 4 Interceptors as well, and by low slots, sorry, what I mean is rigs. For the mechanical rigs on all of these, I've gone for polycarbon engine housing, and for auxiliary thrusters. Now, auxiliary thrusters increase my flight velocity by 10%, which of course in itself means these go faster. Going faster, less likely to be hit. Say it with me now. Then we come across to the polycarbon engine housing. Inertia modifier means this thing turns tighter. Turning tighter means I can maintain that high speed whilst also maintaining a close orbit. I can stay in range with my weapons whilst keeping moving at a fast speed. Now for the combat rigs, I've just gone for a laser collision accelerator, straight up damage bonus of 12.5%, and a laser burst aerator to make those fire that little bit faster. That's an extra DPS increase there as well. Ultimately, these aren't absolutely vital, they do help things out, and if you can get them nice and cheap, go for it. I don't think you need anything more than the Tech Level 1 versions right now. You can do the Tier 7 Anomalies. This is the ship that you will see me doing the Tier 7 Anomalies in later, using just these fittings. So it's nice and easy, nice and basic, and in fairness, if I'd even swapped these down to something a little bit lower, like a standard Mark V pulse laser, you can still achieve that same effect. The Condor II is the Caldari Tech 4 Interceptor frigate, and if we look at its profile here, you'll see it has the same fitting profile, same roll bonus, and same afterburner bonus as the Executioner before it. However, the frigate command bonus this time around is a plus 12% increase to small missile torpedo damage. Obviously that's plus 60% if you've got that at full level 5. Now, you'll probably have noticed the trend already, that the frigate command bonus on each of these Tech 4 Interceptors is related to its weapon system. Now, the Condor II notably has the slowest flight velocity of all 4 of the Tech 4 Interceptors, only 395 meters per second. I say only, it is still an incredibly fast frigate, but just notable, it is the slowest of the Tech 4 Interceptors. Now, the fit that I've gone for here is very similar to the Executioner II, just with a few minor differences here and there. The low slots are the exact same of propulsion with a Mark V small afterburner and a Mark V tank, in this case the small shield booster. Our mid slots are a Mark V small energy Nosferatu and a Mark V stasis webifier for the exact same reasons as mentioned with the Executioner II, but the high slots have of course been swapped out. Instead of lasers, we are using Republic Fleet small torpedo launchers. But Benzie, I've been told that torpedoes are terrible, says everyone in my comments right now. And you would be amazed how many people, so many missile fanboys in my comment section. Missiles are not the be-all and end-all of EVE combat, trust me. And torpedoes are not terrible. You just need to build the right way for them, put them on the right ships. Here you can see that torpedoes have an incredibly short range of 5.5 kilometers, but that doesn't matter when you're whizzing round in a very tight orbit at 2 or 3 kilometers away anyway. Also, yeah, I get it. It's got a very high DPS of 63.86 on paper, but the explosion velocity and explosion radius there, 150 and 16.92 respectively, does mean it never really gets to fully apply that damage. That's where the rigs come in. So let's jump down and have a look at those. Now here you can see that the mechanical rigs I've gone for exactly the same as before, polycarbon engine housing and auxiliary thrusters, maximise our speed and make sure that we can maintain a tight orbit. But for the combat rigs, not only have we gone for a warhead heating catalyst prototype, 7.5% damage bonus, this is one of the free ones that you just got, I just happened to slap one of these on, because you know what, rigging every ship I show in these videos gets expensive. Warhead heating catalyst prototype, 7.5% damage increase, and then I've gone for a warhead rigger catalyst prototype, reduction of 6% to the explosion radius bonus. That means that the damage that you see on screen actually gets applied better. With missiles, your theoretical damage and your actual damage tend to be quite disparaging. It's due to how missiles apply to their target. Again, I've got a video on how missiles work that explains that better than I'm going to here, but by making that explosion radius that little bit tighter, what that means is that you actually apply more of your damage to any target hit. Meaning, in this case, you can see 127.72 damage for a Tech 4 frigate with basic skills and fairly basic equipment fitted to it. This thing is a powerhouse, and we've used these to take out some Caracal Navy issues, we've taken out succubuses, all kinds of crazy stuff using Condors. These are exceptional little frigates. Third up, we have the Atron II, also known as the ugliest of the Tech 4 Interceptor frigates. I mean, ugh, look at this thing, it's just weirdly curvy and bulbous, and it's just misshapen. It looks like someone tried to build a frigate but then partially melted it in the oven. I don't know, it's not as hideous as some of the Galente ships, but it's definitely not up there amongst my favourites anyway, so I tend to pilot this one zoomed right out. Now, being a Galente frigate, well, let's have a look at its stats here. You can probably guess where we're going on this one. Again, same fitting profile, 2, with the same roll bonus, same afterburner bonus, and then we come to the frigate command bonus. 12% small railgun damage, and a 7.5% increase to the accuracy fall-off for small railguns. Again, that's obviously 60% small railgun damage, and 37.5 increase to the accuracy fall-off if trained up to frigate command level 5. Now, ultimately, with the flight velocity here of 426, that puts this in third position for the fastest of the frigates. It's not quite as slow as the Condor, but it's not as fast as the Executioner or the Slasher either. But anyway, that frigate command bonus there, the actually really important part of this is that railgun accuracy fall-off. That means that this is one of the few ships in the game that I would actually recommend fitting small, snub-nosed railguns. Snub-nosed railguns are absolutely atrocious in almost every aspect. They are too short range to be used by almost any ship in the game, with the exception, I would say here, of the Atron II. Ultimately, this gets away with it because of that bonus there. Optimal range of 1.5 and an accuracy fall-off of 2.75 means you can maintain, with how fast and tight this ship can fly, you can actually maintain a 2 to 3 kilometer orbit and get away with it. Anything further than that, and the snub-nosed railguns become pointless. Now, the reason I recommend snub-nosed railguns, though, is straight up that damage. I am not at all skilled in any way in railguns. There's no additional railgun skills here. I haven't trained into them. Yet that's already doing 122.89 on a very cheap fitting. And good lord, those Quaif, yeah, okay, they're the meta level 8 versions of the railguns. Of course it's doing that much damage. I picked these up for 20,000 ISK on the market each. They are that cheap because no one wants to use them, because they're terrible on everything except an Atron II. Now, other than the snub-nosed railguns, the fitting is exactly the same as you'd expect. Mark V small afterburner, with a Mark V tank, in this case the small armor repairer because it is a Galente ship. In the mid-slots, a Mark V small energy Nosferatu, and a Mark V stasis Weberfire for the exact same reasons we've already discussed. Going down into the rigs, again, these are exactly what you would expect. Polycarbon engine housing and auxiliary thrusters for that extra speed and that extra tight turning circle. And then for the for the combat rigs, we've gone for a railgun collision accelerator, straight up damage bonus, railgun burst aerator, activation time adjustment. And again, you can use the free ones for these. The damage that this thing can put out on its own is absolutely terrifying, and it's very, very easy just to build and skill into, and makes a stupidly cheap ship to fly. We come then at last to the Slasher II, although I say at last, I'm actually going to showcase two builds with this one because it's one of my favourite ships in the game and has so much that you can do with it. But anyway, let's have a look at its stats page. So of course, as with the other T4 Interceptor frigates, it has that same fitting profile, same roll bonus and same afterburner bonus, and by this point you should almost be able to guess what the frigate command bonus is. Yes, it's a plus 12% increase to small cannon damage, along with a small cannon tracking speed increase of 7.5. That's 60% damage, 37.5% tracking speed, if you've got that at Frigate Command 5. It's also noticeable that the flight velocity here, 476 meters per second, does make the Slasher II the fastest of the T4 Interceptors, and that's why I use it for the second build that I'll talk about in a moment. But for the first build, of course, we have gone with Republic Fleet small autocannons. We're all about that damage. We're going to be within the range there, 1.39 kilometer optimal range with a 6.3 kilometer accuracy fall-off. We're easily going to be within range there, orbiting nice and quickly and kicking out that damage fairly well. The low slots are exactly what you'd expect, Mark V small afterburner and a Mark V small shield booster, but the mid slots are where this particular build differs ever so slightly. Yep, we've got a Mark V small energy Nosferatu in that first mid slot, but the second one I've swapped out to a Caltrop small energy neutralizer. Again, these are dirt cheap on the market right now, I think because people just don't know what to do with them. So I picked this up for, again, I think it was like 600,000 ISK or something at Pater, I can't remember, it was dirt cheap and I grabbed like 5 of them. Now ultimately what these do is they hammer your opponent's capacitor. Because the cannons don't use any capacitor of my own, and because I'm going so fast I don't need to have my shield booster on at all times, ultimately my capacitor is pretty stable. It doesn't say stable on the fitting page here, but when I'm in combat, it actually is. What this means for me is that rather than having something else in the mid slot, I don't need a web of fire because I don't need to be slowing them down. Rather than having something like that there, I can swap to an energy neutralizer. This allows me to hammer their capacitor and drain them dry. The Nosferatu drains their capacitor into mine and helps fund my afterburner and possibly my shield booster if I need to activate it for a couple of seconds here or there, but the small energy neutralizer just drains theirs right the way down, doesn't feed it into mine, but it kind of damages their capacitor, at which point they've got nothing to power their systems, it shuts them down, and I win. Now, if we look into the rigs here, the mechanical rigs are exactly what you'd expect, the polycarbon engine housing and auxiliary thrusters, but the high slots are, of course, a cannon collision accelerator, oh, it's a prototype, I need to upgrade that one, and a cannon burst aerator activation time adjustment, just because those are the two flat DPS boosts that you can go for here, and just really kick out that damage, 132.64 damage, and that's just with the Republic fleets. If I were to swap that up to something like the spare Gisty Type Cs that I've got there, that damage goes through the roof. Anyway, let's have a look at the second Slasher II build that I have, which is my dedicated tackler. The dedicated tackler Slasher II build that I use is where I kind of break my rule of not making frigates overly expensive, and that's because here in the mid slots I've got two interruptive warp disruptors. These things are worth about 30 to 50 million a pop, so this is a very expensive ship if I do lose it. Now the aim of the game here is for me to fly in to a warp disruptor range with both of these, apply that warp jammer strength of 4 to a target, and survive long enough for my mates to come along, apply their warp jammers, and get the additional damage in place and actually finish that off, at which point I can retreat to safety and heal up from a distance. That means speed and survivability are the name of the game here, hence I've gone for the Slasher II because it is the fastest of the four T4 Interceptor frigates. Now for the high slots, I've not really bothered. My job isn't to do damage, and again, I don't want to put unnecessary cost onto what is already an expensive ship. Mark V small autocannons will do the job nicely. In the low slots, however, I have gone for a Smuggler small afterburner, just because it's that little bit higher value, a little bit faster bonus there. That allows me to get up close and personal very quickly and start to orbit very, very quickly, and I've got a basic damage control. This thing ultimately increases my shield, armor, and structure resistances passively by approximately 8% apiece, meaning I take less damage from any source of damage, but also I can activate it for an additional 800% bonus. That is a huge amount of resistances for 13 seconds, meaning I take almost no damage for those 13 seconds whilst I'm whizzing around. That's the vital part. Hopefully at the end of the 13 seconds, the rest of my fleet have engaged and are taking care of that target, at which point I can disengage and go and heal up. Now, also to help with this, in the in the rigs, I've gone for a core defense force field extender prototype. Again, these are just the free ones. I will upgrade these eventually. 12% shield bonus from each of these, and they do stack. There is no penalty to those, so that's a 24% increase to my shield. Not to shield repair or efficiency or anything like that, just flat out extra shield, which means I've got more HP for the enemy ship to have to go through before they destroy me. Now, you'll notice I haven't had chance yet to fit the mechanical rigs here. Again, though, that would be, of course, your polycarbon engine housing and your auxiliary thrusters. It's all about getting up close and personal as quickly as we can and whizzing around. And you'll see that, okay, the shields aren't huge here, 655, total defense of 1991. That is, of course, before the damage control unit is activated, and it's not taking into consideration the fact that I don't intend to be hit. And that, of course, is the value of speed tanking. If you're looking to fly Tech 4 Interceptor frigates, then of course you're going to want to skill into them. Fortunately, those skills are available to alpha clones, and they're ridiculously cheap and quick to skill into. Now, first and foremost, you're going to want to have to look at Afterburner. Now, Afterburner, of course, is a skill that all 4 of the Interceptors benefit from directly. They get an additional 50% Afterburner velocity bonus as part of the ship's skill bonuses. Here, you can see that the skill itself also gives a 20% increase to Afterburner velocity bonus. That means between the ship and the skill being trained at full level 5, you should have plus 70% Afterburner velocity bonus, making these very fast ships when using an Afterburner. In addition to that as well, you'll see that the skill reduces the amount of capacitor that an Afterburner requires, whilst increasing the activation time of the Afterburner. An increased activation time means you are paying that capacitor cost less frequently. Very useful, as you're going to want that Afterburner to be on basically all the time. You never really want to have the Afterburner turned off, so making sure that it doesn't drain your capacitor is always very useful. Now, secondarily, of course, is the Frigate Command skill. Every one of the Tech 4 Interceptor frigates gets a bonus of some kind for having Frigate Command leveled up. Whether that's an Executioner getting bonuses to lasers, the Atron getting railgun bonuses, the Condor getting missile bonuses, or the Slasher getting cannons, they are weapon upgrades. You just do better damage with those weapons if you have Frigate Command skilled. Of course, the actual skill itself also increases the frigate velocity by 25%, making it a faster frigate, which for speed tanking is always going to be a good thing, plus gives you that inertia modifier reduction of 25% as well, meaning you're able to maintain a tighter orbit. That is, of course, the main skills that you're going to want to look at in regards to fitting out a Tech 4 Interceptor, and whilst you can look at things like shield, armor, or defense upgrade, can be useful, but again, you shouldn't really be getting hit. Engineering shouldn't be a problem, but if you find that your capacitor's draining too fast, do consider training frigate engineering up as well. Finally, though, are the weapon technologies. Now, ultimately, once you've figured out which weapon it is you enjoy most, start to train those skills. Now, for me, I prefer my cannons, so of course I've got small cannon operation and small cannon upgrade all the way up. The thing you'll notice about these particular skills is that every weapon has its own type. They'll all have something, you know, like small weapon operation and small weapon upgrade. Weapon operation will be straight up damage, whereas weapon upgrade will be a bit of damage plus range. Now, the range isn't overly important for the Tech 4 Interceptors. It's nice to have, especially if you're going for the Atron, just to give you that little bit of extra range on the snub-nosed railguns, but it's not overly vital. I would recommend, once you've picked which weapon type you want to go for, whether that's lasers, railguns, cannons, or missiles, getting small cannon operation, or small railgun operation, or whatever, small weapon operation up to level 4, and then small weapon upgrade to 4. Once you've got both of those to 4, that's when I would start training into the advanced variants of those skills. You can see here I'm working on advanced small cannon upgrade before I go into expert small cannon operation, and we'll go up from there. So those are what I would recommend skilling into. Now, anyway, I did promise early on in this video that you can do Tier 7 anomalies in a Tier 4 frigate. So I think it's important now that we undock, I go find a Tier 7 anomaly and showcase that actually in action. Because it's all very well and good me saying you can do it, but let's actually prove it. Now, like in any combat situation, we don't want to warp in at 0, so we'd long press on the warp option, and we're going to take this out to about 45 kilometers, 45-50, somewhere around there, just so that we've got a bit of space between us and the actual ships that we spawn in on. Ultimately, I don't want to start off right next to 5 different ships and have to work out which ones I'm going to take out first. I'd rather have a little bit of range to get that information ahead of time. So here we are jumping now into an Angel Small Anomaly 7 using the Executioner II setup that I showed earlier. So when we arrive, we've got a Hurricane, a Cyclone, a Bellicose, and a Rupture. All of these are cruiser-sized targets or larger. We're going to zoom right out, we're going to get an idea of where these are going, and we're going to come in at an angle in regards to that Cyclone down there. But our first primary target is actually going to be the Bellicose, so that's the one we're going to have locked. We're going to activate the afterburner so that we can get in a little bit faster. Oh, yay, red in local, that's always fun. Who do we have here? Let's just check that quickly. Oh, it's PGE, yeah, great, these guys have been raiding us for a while. Now that we've come in at an angle, that angle is important, by the way. Ultimately, it's what helps us to not get hit on the route in, because we're getting a better transverse velocity. Once we get up nice, close and personal and starting to orbit, I can now activate the 2 lasers and the Energy Nosferatu in order to start leeching off this. Now, zoom out a little bit here. You'll see that I do take a bit of damage here, first of all going through my shields. Obviously this is an armor tank ship, so we're not too worried about that. Now whilst I'm up close and personal here to that Covert Ops Bellicose, it is going to be having a bit of a hard time trying to hit me. Ultimately, if I zoom right in on the graphics here, you should see that most of the shots that are coming past do miss. There's a couple of exceptions there, like the Cyclone firing its missiles at me, but most of those shots are glancing off and grazing just because I'm moving, as you can see at the bottom here, 1,600 meters per second. Now that Bellicose Covert Ops is taking some rather hefty damage from me at this point in time. You can see we're already now down into its armor. So straight away, I'm not even into my armor yet as a frigate, yet I've taken a Bellicose cruiser all the way through its shield and halfway through its armor now. It just takes a bit of time here to get through that, but you can see ultimately the point I'm trying to get at here is that I'm not taking much damage at all by doing this. By orbiting, I'm maintaining a very fast speed around that Bellicose, and as long as it's not webbing me, then I've got no real problems here. I'm barely getting hit. As a point, if any of these ships did decide to apply stasis webifiers to me, those would need to be my #1 priority targets. Ultimately, if I'm doing any of these encounters and a ship webs me, I immediately log across to that one and start shooting. If you actually change your overview to ship, you can see what ships are local and what they've got applied to you. So here I can see that the Gistum Cyclone has an Energy Nosferatu targeted on me at the moment. So if I was really struggling with my Nos, which I'm not, with my capacitor, sorry, I could actually go straight after that Cyclone in order to take it out. As it stands though, that Bellicose, well, you can see we're now down into hull. I'm not going to go through this entire anomaly with you, simply because it's just going to be me rambling and, you know, just showcasing the same thing over and over again. But you see, I'm still not even out of shield yet, despite that this is an armor tank frigate. That's how little damage I'm actually taking in this build, and that Bellicose is about to go down, so we're going to change target now to the Rupture. I just wanted to jump ahead here to showcase the fact that we've now taken out that Hurricane and I'm going after the Cyclone, just to prove that this is not just me trying to... I've had accusations of people saying, oh, you're just clipping the bits that showcase what you want to see. No, not really, I'm just clipping it because it's boring as hell watching me do this for 20 minutes. Ultimately, you can see the amount of damage I'm putting out to the Cyclone here, and it wasn't much faster at all going through the... through the Hurricane. But there we are, it is possible. Ultimately, the Hurricane did do a little bit of damage to me as I approached it. I messed up my orbit ever so slightly, but it was nothing that the armor repairer couldn't get. I think I literally dropped down to about 92% armor, and the armor repairer has topped it up, and as you can see, I'm actually switching that off now, so we're back into shield quite comfortably. I think actually the Hurricane does have autocannon, so it was able to hit me just that little bit better than some of the others, but still no threat whatsoever. And as you can see, I'm just now politely orbiting, I'm now orbiting the Gistum Cyclone there, and slowly but surely whittling it down politely. Yeah, you know, shoot them, you know, politely. Yeah, bonus points to anyone in the comments who can tell me what that's from. Anyway, folks, that really does wrap up everything I wanted to showcase here to you in regards to speed tanking. Just wanted to prove that, yes, a T4 Frigate can comfortably do Tier 7 anomalies. Smalls definitely, mediums take a little bit more work, larges are possible, but you just need to be careful and probably have an autopilot set to jump out if you need to, if things start to get a little bit hairy. But ultimately, it is entirely possible, and there is good money to be made doing this. Ultimately, there's a lot of ISK for popping the ships, etc., just for the bounties, plus they drop some really nice loot. Obviously at Tech 7 they're dropping Mark 7 loot, no one can equip that yet for a couple of weeks from this point in time, but ultimately there will be a market for that eventually, or you can just reprocess it down into the minerals, which is always useful. Very useful as well to reprocess any debris that you get here, as you can get some of the higher tier rig rewards that allow rig salvage items that allow you to build the tier 2 versions of various different rigs. Anyway, folks, I do hope that's inspired some thoughts for you. Go out there, jump into a very fast frigate, and try speed tanking in some combat anomalies, and see how you get along. You'd be amazed at how well this actually works, and how much ISK you can make in a surprisingly short amount of time. Anyway, thanks for watching, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!